Okie dokie. So my name is Kelly. I am the University Village Parent University Site Coordinator that serves Network 6. Welcome to Face to Face. Today we have the Office of Student Health and Wellness. And just a couple of things for you guys to know. The session will be recorded. We want to share this knowledge with parents who are unable to attend today. And so all previous sessions can be found on our YouTube channel, including this session at bit.ly/face YouTube, and that link will be dropped in the chat. We will have a presentation followed by a conversation with Booker Marshall. And the chat and Q&A will be open throughout the meeting to allow participants to type questions, but also please keep in mind that we may not have time to get to every single question. Also, please mute your mic, be respectful with your comments, and to allow everyone the opportunity to share, please be brief when sharing. And then don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at bit.ly/face newsletter. And join us for our next sessions. They aren't here on the screen, but if you do sign up for that newsletter, you will be alerted about our upcoming sessions. So once again, my name is Kelly, and I am the University Village Site Coordinator for Parent University that serves Network 6. Today we have the Office of Student Health and Wellness about Gender 101. So our presenter for today is Booker Marshall. Booker, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. I'm actually going to introduce our actual presenters, but my name is Booker Marshall. I use they, them pronouns. I am the LGBTQ+ and Sexual Health Program Manager in the Office of Student Health and Wellness. And that's my cat, Ollie. And I am pleased to welcome our team from Lurie Children's Hospital. I'm not sure I can pronounce the actual name of your division, so I'm going to let y'all take it away.
Yeah, that is okay. Usually we just call it potato snack for folks that can't pronounce it. But my name is Logan. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am with Lurie Children, and we are the Division of Adolescent Medicine. Really excited that folks are here today so we can talk about some language that we're currently using and go over some scenarios, and I will let my co-presenter introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Talia. I use they, them pronouns. En español, yo uso el pronombre ella. And I'm also super excited to be here as an educator for Lurie. To talk about gender with everyone.
Awesome. I do ask that if we need to slow down at any point for interpretation, please let us know in the chat or use the hand raise function, or simply unmute and say, Logan, shut up, and I will do so. But I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. One moment, please. Awesome. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Rad. I know that y'all use Google a lot, but I'm so excited that it's Zoom just because now I can also see my own face and y'all's too as we're presenting. So some guidelines today. I will say that our time with you is till 5:30, so there might not be a ton of time for questions with us at the end. We'll for sure stay a little while longer. But just to say, if you have a question throughout our time together, please use that hand raise function or feel free to unmute yourself and ask. I also want to say there's going to be no wrong or right questions. This is the time to ask. This is the time to listen in. If you're unsure about something, we're here to help you do so in a respectful way. I know that language is always changing, and so sometimes it feels like marbles in your mouth while you're trying to get a question out or kind of explain a situation. So feel free, we will correct your language, but please know it's a call in to just be most respectful. And then confidentiality. We ask that we keep it general today, but if there's something that comes up or something someone shares, we ask that that stays in the Zoom room, even the recording. But if we learn something today, like how to use they, them, their pronouns in a sentence, that is information that we want you to take far and wide. Check your tech. What that means is if you got to take a phone call, if your computer's on the fritz, we ask that you just do so quietly. And then shape the discussion to fit your needs. Once again, if we're going over something that you, or you're like, oh, this is my student, or this is a scenario that I know, feel free. We want to hear about it. Awesome. So just going over what we're going to talk about today, we're going to go over some key terms and concepts related to gender. We're going to outline some characteristics of gender and how we are going to be a gender inclusive school with some tactics and really wonderful things that we can implement in the classroom. We're going to discuss how to talk about gender diversity with our students, guardians, and the school community. And then we're going to outline some behaviors that promote inclusive schools, not only for our students, but also for our staff, our families. It's going to be wonderful. Any questions so far? So I'm not going to read this whole slide, but this is just to say that we're coming from a place where we want folks to have an understanding, to manage emotions. We want to set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others. So it's really important that we go through this lens of social emotional learning with our presentation. I always like to give a second so people can interpret. So why is the staff from Larry Children's Hospital here facilitating this discussion? Why is the hospital here talking to schools, right? So it is our principle, this is what we stand for, that not only is this a political issue talking about gender diversity and inclusivity in this way, but it's also a health issue. This is for the health and well-being of all students. This creates empathy, it creates understanding. This shows that there's worlds outside of our own when we talk about all people, when we represent all people. And really, if this was a conversation that was going to lift one group up while pushing another group down, we wouldn't be here talking about it. So why is it our goal to be an affirming institution? Some folks might have heard when they were in school, like, oh, I tolerate gay people, or I tolerate that lifestyle. And that feels horrible. Who wants to just be tolerated? And who's to say that, you know, you're right and I'm wrong? So even with the word accept, which a lot of us might have heard in high school, like, oh, I accept gay people. I accept LGBTQ people. That's still gatekeeping. That's still saying, you know, I am to say what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And we're really not seeing that person as themselves. And so that's why it's our goal to be an affirming institution, to see that person wholly, to celebrate all parts of them, and really just champion them. That's why it is our goal and not something we've accomplished, because that line is always going to be moving. So I would love a volunteer, but it's okay if we're feeling shy. I know it's, you know, we're getting done with work. It's the most Monday of all Mondays. But I would love for folks to internally think about, what does it mean to be female or male? What is your gender and how do you know your gender? And so without discussing how you look or taking a body part inventory, that's a big one. How would you describe your gender? I'll give it a second. Does anyone want to be brave and tell me how you would discuss your gender without talking about how you look? So I have a friend that does this for another organization, and I told her to put this in her slide deck, this question. I was like, it's a big thumper. No one's going to know how to answer this. And she turned to me and she was like, okay, well, how do you describe your gender without talking about the way you look for doing a body part inventory? And I was like, good question. I'm not sure. I gotta really think about it. So here I am asking you all how you would describe your gender, and I hadn't thought of the question myself. And so I guess when I think about it, not only is it this deeply felt sense of self of who I am, like I know who I am, but I think it's the community that I keep too. Folks that feel similarly.
¿Puedo comentar algo? Mire, bueno, como qué significa ser hembra o varón. Voy a definirme como persona. Soy una persona que tiene sentimientos, que le gusta vivir la vida felizmente, sea hombre, sea mujer, sea hombre, sea mujer. Creo que el género, pues en sí, no tiene nada que ver con respeto mutuo. Todos tenemos que respetarnos y querernos y respetar. Como decimos, somos únicos en esta vida. Todos, imagínense, si todos pensáramos en que somos únicos, sabríamos que cada uno tenemos diferentes pensamientos y con eso la empatía la administraríamos aquí y no nos haríamos daño aparte del género que seamos. Gracias.
Gracias, Margarita. Sí, es que tú compartes aquí es como el punto de esta pregunta, porque somos humanos y tenemos diferentes intereses y más, y por eso es porque tenemos respeto por todos. Si el género es solo un parte de una persona, y gracias mucho por sus pensamientos.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you, T. And so as we were thinking about this, have there been times or when limits or expectations have been placed on you based on your gender or your perceived gender, as well as how did this impact your ability to do your best work, especially when we think about our students, in the classroom every day? So we're going to be going over some key concepts. The first key concept I want everyone to pay attention to is sex assigned at birth. And the word that I really want to focus on right here is that word assigned. Sex assigned at birth, typically that's going to be from one human to another based on limited information. That limited information typically being what is in between the baby's legs. So that doula, midwife, doctor, whoever delivers that baby is going to deliver the baby. And when they see that the baby has a penis, they're going to go, it's a boy, not a trick question. Or if the baby has a vulva, it's a girl, right? And so we see that typically that M or that F is going to follow that human for the rest of their lives, on birth certificates, on driver's license, on anything that you need to put whatever your sex assigned at birth is on documentation. So that is sex assigned at birth. And I know there's some folks that believe that there are only two genders. And so we want to talk a bit about that, especially too when we're talking about sex assigned at birth. We come to the word intersex. And so with the word intersex, we already see right there that there are some folks that don't neatly fit into one or another box. And that is, And that is based on multiple categories of how to be a person and how folks are born. And that can be with body part inventory. That could be that we believe this person is going to go through puberty one way and then they start experiencing puberty another way. That could be because of the outward appearance of genitalia. It could be all the way down to someone's chromosomes, or maybe someone's getting ready in their life and they're having trouble conceiving. And so they're all different types of ways that folks find out that they fall under that intersex category, or maybe they've known this since birth. I want to say too, for folks that are under that intersex category, there's absolutely no need for any sort of medical intervention. It is very rare that this is life-threatening, so only then would that be necessary for a medical intervention without somebody's consent. And really, no one should be consenting to any sort of surgery until they are of age. I want to say too that it is a lot more common than we might think. And so with the react buttons, can we use the hand raise feature? Let me know if you know someone with natural red hair. Natural red hair. I know we're in the Midwest, so there's a lot more redheads around. Natural red hair, go ahead. Yeah, I'm seeing some folks raise their hands. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, so the rate of folks in the intersex community is about the same rate as folks with natural red hair. So right then and there, we're seeing it is a lot more common than one might think. And I would love to just say that intersex folks can live happy, healthy, normal lives, families, jobs, you know, probably some intersex folks among us, and that is super rad. And so just wanted to state that as well. So if anyone has their hand raised right now, you can put it down. But go ahead and give me a thumbs up react. Give me a thumbs up react if you have a gender identity. Gender identity. Awesome. I promise this is my only trick question today. Yeah, so everyone has a gender identity. Gender identity. That is going to be your deeply felt sense of self. Deeply felt sense of self. So whenever I think about this term, I always point to my head because this is how I see myself. This is how I know myself. This is who I am when I wake up in the morning. This is my gender identity. You know yourself. I don't know you. Which brings us to gender expression. And I always like to do like spirit fingers up and down. Gender expression. This is how I show myself. This is how I show myself to the outside world. And depending on where you are in the world, there might be some stereotypes that come along with how others see you, right? And so your gender identity, that's how I see myself. My gender expression, that's how I show myself to the outside world. Can anybody be brave and tell me why your gender identity and your gender expression might not match up? What could be a reason? Okay, I'll give one while y'all are still thinking.
So we have one in the chat. So she's saying my gender is, sorry, hold on. My gender is defined by the like who I am.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so gender identity, how we see ourselves, how we know ourselves. When we think about, you know, how we see ourselves versus how we express ourselves, there could be times where that doesn't match up, and that could be for a variety of reasons. It could be that we're still trying to figure ourselves out, or it could be that we live in areas where maybe we don't feel the safest, whether that's within our own personal circles or in our community circles, to show ourselves. It also could be that we are, you know, I see myself one way, but the way that I present and feel most comfortable is, you know, I told you my name is Logan. I use he, him, his pronouns. I see myself as a trans masculine person, which we can get into in just a second. But if I were to wear a face full of makeup and have long hair and wear a dress and paint my nails, there could be assumptions about the way that I present and who I am based on the way I look that don't match up with how I see myself. Does that make sense? And or do we have any questions? Awesome. So another concept I want to talk about, and this is something that we typically talk about with our littles, is gender expansive or gender creative, non-conforming. I want to say gender play is super, super normal for all little kiddos. And we see this very often. I'm sure if you go home to your parents' house and you crack open a photo album, you might see, you know, your uncle wearing red lipstick and in mom's heels, different things like that. we wouldn't call that gender like creative or gender non-conforming until it becomes a long-standing occurrence. And so the example we give for this is, if we have Tommy, and Tommy loves to be in Big Sister's dresses and Big Sister's clothing, loves to wear her makeup and pearls, different things like that, we can consider that gender play. But for Tommy in particular, this has been a long-standing occurrence. It is not a fleeting curiosity or interest. Let's say it's been over 6 months. And so this isn't play for Tommy anymore. This is how Tommy feels most comfortable. This is how Tommy likes to present himself. This is how he likes to express himself. Would we call Tommy transgender? No, right? Because Tommy hasn't told us that he's transgender. He's also still going by Tommy, still using he, him, his pronouns, still saying, hey, I'm a little brother, but this is how he likes to express himself. So this could be a situation in which we use the term gender expansive or gender creative. It's because we don't typically see this among other little boys, right? We can use that expression. And just to say too, gender nonconformity is a normative variation of human diversity. Any questions before we move on? Awesome, y'all. Breezing through. Everyone's got it. All right. Cisgender. Give me a thumbs up if you know what cisgender means. Yeah, thumbs up. Awesome. Talia, you know it. Booker, I'm not going to say I'm surprised you know what it means either. All right, yay. What we say with this is typically if you don't know what this means, it's probably you. And so with cisgender, this is going to be Latin for same side as, same side as. So the simplest definition I can give for cisgender is someone that aligns with, agrees with, the sex they were assigned to at birth. So just to give a quick example again, someone delivers that baby, they go, it's a girl. That person grows up and identifies as a woman, cisgender. Which brings us to the term transgender or trans. Trans is going to be Latin for across from. And so the simplest definition I can give for transgender is someone that doesn't agree with or doesn't align with the sex they were assigned to at birth. And that is the definition of transgender, right? We don't agree with, so the doctor delivers the baby, that she goes, it's a girl. I grow up and say, no, I'm not. I am a transgender person. And that is just one example of a way to be a transgender person, or I guess I am. And then non-binary. So I am not a non-binary person, but the simplest definition I can give for non-binary is, so some folks see gender on a scale, right? And so we have being a man on one side, being a woman on the other side, and some non-binary folks take a look at this scale and say, I fall somewhere on that scale, not on one perfect end. And some folks take a look at that scale and say, that's a great scale. And they throw it out and they say, I'm not on that scale, I am a person. And so that is just two ways that some folks can identify as non-binary. You might meet someone that identifies as transgender or non-binary, or they use a different term for themselves. And that definition that I gave for either of those might not exactly line up with that person. What we want to do is we want to mirror language. And if that person describes themselves, that's how they are. This is who they are. And we want to take their word as right, because it is. And I also want to say that cisgender, transgender, non-binary, these are not genders within themselves, but they are describing words. Do you have any questions before we move on? And if the question is, what are those symbols? That's a great question. And we're going to move on. All right. So the word transgender is an umbrella term. And what the simplest definition I can give for that is that there's so many other describing words that can be under that transgender umbrella. As you just heard me say, I'm a trans masculine person. So for me personally, what this means is I don't identify as a man, but I am a transgender person and I present very masculinely. And so that is what that means to me. It might mean something else to other people. And the reason why we show you this umbrella, I want to say, it says it here, but this list is not exhaustive. The reason why we show you this umbrella is because there might be other terms that people use to describe themselves, and that is beautiful and amazing. And when they describe themselves as that, cool. They just told you who they are, and we're not ever going to question that. So you don't need to memorize this whole list, but just know that there's other words out there that folks can use. And this is not a new concept. This is not something that came around with Chaz Bono or Caitlyn Jenner. The concept of gender diversity has been around since the beginning of time, in the beginning of recorded history, right? And so as we look at this map right here, you can see that there are places around the world where they use their own, definitions and their own language to describe gender or gender diversity outside of those two boxes of being a man or being a woman. And they wouldn't use words like transgender, or they may not use words like transgender or non-binary because they have their own language as well as their own cultural backgrounds and history when describing gender diversity. The term I can think of right now that some might be familiar with is two-spirit. Once again, I am not a two-spirit person, so I will give my best definition. But someone in the indigenous or native community could identify as two-spirit, and the simplest definition you can give of that is someone that holds both the energy of masculinity and femininity. Throughout history, a lot of folks in a gender diverse category or outside of that man or woman category have been very well respected leaders, healers, folks, that hold that wisdom. And it really wasn't until colonization that this became, more oppressed or illegal. Is still in a lot of places in the world to identify somewhere outside of being a man or a woman. I also want to say that there are still places in the world where this as, having gender diversity is still celebrated, but it is definitely a less common thing. Any questions so far? All right, we're breezing along, folks. Pronouns. Everyone loves pronouns. We're so excited. We love talking about pronouns. There's really no reason to be scared of pronouns. It is a helpful thing, my friends. I also want to say it is okay to ask folks their pronouns. I'll repeat myself. It is okay to ask folks their pronouns when we do so respectfully. A really simple and easy way to do so respectfully is to introduce yourself, or when you introduce yourself with your name, also include your pronouns. It's super easy, simple, like when we all jumped on here, I said, hello, my name is Logan. I use he, him, his pronouns. You can definitely ask someone, T, can I use you as an example? Cool. Hi, my name is Logan. I use he, him, his pronouns. May I ask you your name and your pronouns?
Sure. Hi, Logan. It's so nice to meet you. My name's T and my pronouns are they, them, theirs.
Rad. Thank you so much. Cool. Do you want to eat pizza now? See, it could be that simple. And so with pronouns too, we also say if you go into a room and you're scanning around and you see one person and you're like, I'm not sure what their pronouns are, we never want to just point that one person out. That could be really dangerous. That could be uncomfortable. You could be outing someone. We want to ask the whole room. And also, we don't want to make assumptions about the way that folks might identify. And so it's just super easy, simple. Introduce yourself with your name and your pronouns. And when you're also showing folks, I am a safer person because I am aware and not making an assumption that some folks might use pronouns that I didn't assume they used. So some common pronouns that we see are going to be they, them, theirs, she, her, hers, he, him, his. This is not the only set of pronouns that there are. There are other sets of pronouns that you can use. And so a really great website to use, and she's going to throw it in the chat box, is -18.org. It's really cute too because it's an Australian website, and so you get to hear like fun accents. But they have this really cool thing on the website where it'll help you conjugate a bunch of different pronouns, and they have some more pronouns that folks might use that are not as common. And so I want to say too, for they, them, their pronouns, we actually use those all the time to talk about a single person without even realizing it. If we were all in person right now and I forgot my cell phone in a classroom, I know everyone here is so lovely and nice that they would pick up my cell phone and go, oh my gosh, someone forgot their cell phone. Oh, they're going to be so mad when they get home and realize they left their cell phone here. We all knew I was talking about one person, right? I just wasn't making an assumption about their gender. And so now we want to take that might be in the back of our minds, and we want to go ahead and pull it right up to the front of our minds and say, hey, let's not make an assumption about people. But not only that, when someone gives us their pronouns, we want to be very intentional to use their pronouns. And so I would love folks, if anyone wants to be brave, to, usually we would turn to our neighbors, but tell me what you did over the weekend with using gender neutral language. So no gendered language. So we're not going to say my wife, maybe we'll say my partner. We're not going to say my niece. Maybe we'll say my nibbling, which is the gender neutral term for the children of our siblings. And if you didn't do anything over this weekend, tell me about what you watched on Netflix. No spoilers on Squid Game. All right. Who would like to share? I know I have some brave CPS staff on here.
I can go.
Awesome. Let's hear
Okay.
it.
So this weekend, I came home and I called my partner, who is currently living in Florida, and we watched a movie together. And that was my Friday night. Saturday, I spoke to my sibling about getting together Thursday afternoon to play video games with their partner. And let's see, on Sunday, I spent 2 hours talking about my future with where my partner and I are planning on potentially moving. So, and that was it. I spent the rest of my day at
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And I almost like that you messed up because it shows, you know, it happens and we need to, you know, take a little time. We're thinking about it, but everyone understood your story. We heard all about your weekend, which sounds lovely. I'm glad you got to do a little party watching with your partner. That sounds real cute. And who doesn't love video games? But yeah, so when we're doing activities like this, it could be a really great way to insert pronouns and neutral language into our vocabulary. So that way it gets easier and easier as we go. This could be something that you do with your family when we're talking, you know, about Netflix. Hey, everyone, let's take 5 minutes and let's talk about this show using gender neutral language. Awesome. Now I feel 10 times more confident when we go and see cousin Jill, who uses they, them, their pronouns. See? But mistakes happen, and we know mistakes happen. So what do? Well, we've come up with 4 easy steps. So I also want to say that we have terms for when we misgender someone, when we call them the wrong name, when we call them using the wrong pronouns, pronouns that are not affirming to them. That's called misgendering, and it is seen as a microaggression. And then dead naming. Dead naming is when we use the name that is no longer affirming or just not the right name for that person, right? Dead naming, also a microaggression. Although I will say that it feels like a macroaggression. I was asking a coworker how they would describe the feeling of being misgendered. And the first thing they said was, am I safe here? That's the first thing that comes to mind when someone misgenders them or dead names them. And so, you know, I understand mistakes happen. And a big part of this is what we do when we make the mistake. So the first thing is, if this is the first time that someone is telling you the correct answer, or maybe a first reminder, we want to say thank you. You know, thank you so much. Thank you for letting me know, right? Thank you for the correction. If this is something that's happened before, right, we can say sorry. But we don't want to make it a big apology. We don't want to make it long. We definitely don't want to be like, well, I knew you before and it's just so hard. And like, I knew you when you were just a little kid, or, you know, I'm trying my best. Totally understand that. For as uncomfortable as you feel, the person in this situation that is being misgendered is probably going to feel 10 times more uncomfortable. So we want to make it short and sweet. We want to thank that person, or we want to say a quick sorry, and then we want to correct ourselves. Oh, do we have a hand? Yeah, Christina.
Sí, yo tengo una pregunta. En este país nosotros todos, una mayoría de personas según nuestra comunidad, hablamos diferentes idiomas. Unos hablamos español, otros inglés. Yo en mi caso hablo inglés, hablo español, hablo italiano, hablo portugués. Y yo me pregunto, cuando uno habla diferentes idiomas, puede ver la claridad de algunas cosas que no se ven cuando se hablan solo idioma. Y las personas no pienso que tienen la intención de ofender a nadie cuando se dirigen a alguien y se equivocan o tienen creo yo que llamarle microagresión es algo fuerte, porque muchas personas no lo hacen con esa intención. Esa es la primera cosa que a mí me llama la atención. Y la segunda, ¿hasta qué punto?
Permítame, Cristina, déjeme traducir qué estás diciendo. Permítame.
Sí.
So she's saying that in this country, we speak so many different languages. In her home, she speaks Spanish, English, Portuguese, and she's saying that sometimes her first point is that sometimes people don't do it on purpose, or they have they are not doing it with like ill intentions. Okay, continúa, por favor.
Y también respetar a la persona significa que en su género la persona tiene una intimidad, una privacidad. Y yo a veces me pregunto, ¿quién soy yo para sobrepasar esa línea donde esa persona tiene una intimidad, que esa persona decide que está en su derecho? Pero como el lenguaje es tan sensiblemente equivocado, pues parece una paranoia del lenguaje. Ya nadie sabe qué decir ni cómo decir, porque qué tal si se ofende, qué tal si no le dije correcto. Pero yo pienso que a mí si me dicen por mi nombre estoy bien. Y no creo que ninguna persona tiene derecho a invadir mi intimidad diciéndome o queriendo saber qué yo soy. Yo soy lo que yo soy, lo que yo elegí. Y nací mujer, bueno, ok, así nací naturalmente. ¿Puedo elegir otras cosas? Puedo hacerlo, pero el respeto que yo tengo para esta posición, pues es un respeto que pido para mí, pero a la vez lo practico con las respetando, jamás me atrevo a invadir esa privacidad. Su género es algo totalmente respetable y íntimo, muy íntimo. Entonces, así como que no me termina de quedar claro esto. Me entra un debate, me entra una confusión y el lenguaje se me hace confuso, muy confuso. Esa es mi aportación y sí me gustaría aclararme un poquito, ¿no? Porque como le digo, en el lenguaje las interpretaciones son diferentes. También hacia el idioma son diferentes. Y las personas nos equivocamos a veces. Se me sale una palabra que yo ni siquiera estaba pensando. Digo, wow, me equivoqué y me da preocupación. No quiero ofender, claro, a nadie, pero con tanta sensibilidad hacia una sola letra, pues dice uno, ay, Diosito Santo, no se vaya a ofender, ¿no? Entonces, es como un poquito andar caminando muy delicadamente en algo que no debería hacer. Y bueno, por eso estamos educando aquí, pero sí debe ser una forma más clara, pienso yo. Muchos conceptos sí me confunden, son conceptos muy fuertes y creo que poquitos es más que muchos. Pienso yo, ¿verdad? Pero le agradezco su atención. Gracias.
Ok, entonces tu pregunta fue que quieres saber cómo tratamos de hacer ese cambio o cómo.
¿Podría decir cómo implementan ese vocabulario,
Ok,
ese nuevo vocabulario? Porque
ok.
no es un vocabulario ni siquiera oficial. El español es un lenguaje bien concreto, bien claro.
Ujú.
Y una parte importante que tenemos, el conflicto que yo creo que tenemos, es nuestra falta de entendimiento, nuestra falta de sabernos comunicar. Y si a eso le agregamos que estamos agregando otras palabras que ni siquiera no se han puesto en práctica, no las hemos practicado, nadie las está reconociendo en nuestro propio lenguaje. Entonces digo yo, wow, ¿cómo le vamos a hacer si ni siquiera estamos practicando algo que es oficial? La Academia Real Española todavía no reconoce muchas palabras como algo que nos podríamos comunicar. Y es algo importante porque si yo voy al diccionario y lo busco, ahí me puedo aclarar. Eso entendí mal porque esta palabra no quiere decir esto, quiere decir esto, o me aclaro. Pero si yo voy al diccionario y busco términos que ahorita estoy escuchando, pues no los voy a encontrar porque no son oficiales. Entonces, ahí como que a quién le voy a estar preguntando. ¿De acuerdo?
Sí,
Creo
sí.
que hace falta.
So, so she's asking, essentially she said that she doesn't want to offend anybody. And so she's saying that, if she says who I am, I am who I am. And and so how do we implement these like practices into like daily life? And then also she's saying that, when she looks up a word in the dictionary, she can look it up and she knows what that word is, but this is not an official like term or word that she can just go to. And so she's asking about how to implement these practices so that she doesn't offend somebody. And then I think the other, twofold thing that she's trying to explain is that, especially in the Spanish language, we gender like almost every word. And so I guess that's the other like twofold issue here is that, how do you implement that? Because I think it's a little bit easier to implement it in the English language. And so I think it's a little harder to do it in the Spanish language. So that's her question.
Yeah, I'm gonna let T take this one away.
Sure. Okay. I'm trying to think if I like want to respond in Spanish, but I think I can say it easier in English. And thank you, Myra, for interpreting what I'm trying to say. But definitely in Spanish, I hear that like our language is very gendered. And when we talk about things like the cup of water or the table, we're using gendered like la before that. But we can certainly make changes to our language when we're talking about people to reflect their gender identity or how they want to be referred to. It's not recognized by those people in Spain that like tell us what words are words in Spanish, but there's certainly communities of people all across Central South America here in the United States that are like in our communities making those changes to our language. So when I introduced myself, I said that I use they, them pronouns, but in Spanish, there's a movement of folks that are using ella as a gender neutral pronoun in Spanish. And it won't be something, if you look it up in your dictionary, that like will come up, but you know, if there's like YouTube videos on like TikTok and social media and folks writing about their experiences with like being a non-binary person that speaks Spanish, that lives in a community that predominantly speaks Spanish. So while there might not be any like official recognition of ways that we can adapt to like, you know, affirm everybody in their identities, it's certainly things that are happening like in pockets in our communities. I've definitely seen it amongst like students in schools who speak Spanish. So I think too, just like when we're in the context of today, thinking about how we're affirming young people in our lives and students at CPS is also like listening to what they're telling us they're experiencing and how they want to be referred to in Spanish, or how they're hoping that like the language we use to speak about them and affirm them can adapt in that way. But yeah, I definitely hear that like more officially and broadly, and also the Spanish that we speak is probably very different. Like my family's from Guatemala. The language that I learned from my dad is certainly different than the language that like other folks or how folks speak Spanish too. And same for just like our neighborhoods in Chicago, so different. So this is not like a clear answer, but just to speak to that like one component of how we're speaking Spanish and trying to affirm folks too. It isn't super clear, but I know that we're all trying. And I think that's like what we can do is to try to adapt. And also this language, it's never been perfect. It won't ever be perfect to describe how we're feeling. And yeah, we can also like create space for ourselves and for others in it. Hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Celia. I would say too, like the only thing I would add is language is evolving. Language is always evolving. We're not speaking in Old English anymore. We're not, you know, language is supposed to help us communicate with each other. And so, you know, new words and phrases and new definitions to words are happening all the time. Actually, for they and them, you know, in the English language, that was a pronoun before he or she. And I know that none of the folks here are doing anything or saying anything, you know, purposefully or making a mistake purposefully, you know, but it is that we are practicing and we're open to learning new things. Just a few years ago, they, them, theirs was placed in the Webster's dictionary as a single-use pronoun, with New York Times Word of the Month. And so we are seeing change, and we are seeing it across the board, across the world. And like I said too, there's going to be languages where they're going to use different definitions, different words, cultural meanings behind the language. Yeah, sorry if I'm now babbling. But Becca, did you have anything you'd like to add? Becca is with us at Lurie as well. Okay, maybe she'll come back. But yeah, so I just want to say, you know, when we do make those mistakes, when they happen, because they're going to happen, and you know, I assume especially if we're speaking multiple languages, mistakes are going to happen. And I think what really matters is that how we handle this situation. And so when we make a mistake, just saying that quick sorry or, you know, quick thank you, and then correcting ourselves, saying the right name, saying the right pronouns, because this could be the first time all day that someone has heard the correct name or the correct pronouns, and we're showing them that we know what the answer is. And then move on. We don't want to sit in this moment, and practice. Practice using the example I gave before at home. Call upon your partners, If you're someone in CPS, maybe this is when we call on someone from staff to help practice pronouns and using a specific person's affirmed name. Becca, did you want to add anything? Okay, girl, I'm going to keep going. All right. And then Christina, did you have anything else that you would like to ask or say? I see your hand is still up.
No, perdón, no bajé la manita, tengo que bajarla. Ya respondí, gracias por la pregunta. Digo, gracias por la respuesta. Ahorita bajo mi manita, muchas gracias.
Thank you. Awesome. So now we're going to talk about the...
¿Me puede verificar, por favor?
Now we're going to talk about the key concept of transition. So transition, the simplest definition I can give is the process by which an individual begins to live in their affirmed gender. That is what a transition is. We always say that there is no one way to be transgender, therefore there is no one way to transition. Some ways that we typically see folks transition, this is going to be the most common, but like I said, there's no one way to transition. So some folks may elect one of these things, two of these things, none of these things. That doesn't make them any more or any less transgender. This person tells me who they are, that's who they are. But we do see that there is a lot of, there is a big social aspect to this. Typically that's going to be a change of appearance. Maybe this is a change of name. Maybe a haircut, right? That's social change. Maybe that's a change in pronouns. This is typically going to cost someone going through a transition the least amount of money. Still some money, right? And it also costs everyone here $0 to use their affirmed name and pronouns. So that is going to be that social change. So when we're thinking about our students, when we're thinking about our youth, maybe that is us changing the name in a grade book, us changing the name at the administrative office so that it reflects on the computers, right? If we're in a Zoom classroom, that could be a different name or pronouns, as you see some of us have them in our little name area. And then so now we want to talk about legal. So we'll say social is probably the only thing you need to know, if at all, about someone going through a transition. You know, I say if at all, because if we knew that person prior, we want to make sure that we're using the affirmed name and pronouns. But that legal change is going to be typically a driver's license, social security card, birth certificate. I want to say that this can be a very lengthy process. It can also be a very expensive process for some folks. There's even states where you're still not able to get these things changed. I also want to say that, yeah, it's not just going to be your driver's license or state ID, but pretty much every single thing that you legally sign your name to, all of the not fun things too, like, you know, rent and lease and loans. And so if you know someone going through this legal change, buy them a cookie. They're probably really stressed out. They have to do all these papers. And I promise you, just when you think you're done, there's more things that you're like, oh gosh, my name's on this. All right. And then medical. So I just want to say for medical, there's no one magic surgery. There's absolutely no one magic surgery that changes, you know, Vanessa into Tommy. But rather a plethora of options that folks can elect for themselves. That might include hormones, that might include surgical treatments. Once again, there's no one big sex change operation. Please just take that term out of your vocabulary. But once again, a plethora of options that folks can elect for themselves, such, you know, top surgery, bottom surgery, different facial surgeries, different things like that. Do we have any questions before we move on? Awesome. And I want to say we got about 30 minutes left for folks. Folks looking at time. Sexual orientation. Sexual orientation, that is going to be who you are romantically or sexually attracted to. Asterisk, you do not need to be sexually or romantically attracted to anyone. That is also a sexual orientation. But can everyone see the circles at the bottom of my screen? Can I get a thumbs up? Perfect. This is a Venn diagram. This is a Venn diagram. T hates this joke. They are not touching. They are not touching. So they are not the same. Our sexual orientation or our sexuality, who we are attracted to, asterisk, you don't need to be attracted to anyone. And our gender identity, who we are two different things. We often bring up the word queer when we talk about our sexual orientation slide or talk about different sexualities. This has been a bit of a buzzword as of late. This is what is considered a reclaimed term. I could probably talk about this one word for an additional hour. But the simplest definition I can give for queer is typically someone that doesn't identify as straight or cisgender. There's also some political backing behind this term. Typically, when someone identifies using the word queer, it's because they have certain political beliefs. I also want to say for this word, queer, it is, like I said, it is a word that has been taken back by a large part of the community, but we still want to be really thoughtful about when and where we're using this word or this term, because there are some people that still feel as though this is an oppressive term or derogatory term, especially folks that are older in the LGBTQ community, when this word especially was used to weaponize community in the 1980s, especially during the AIDS epidemic. So I do not suggest going up to someone and asking them, hey, are you queer? I don't know how they're going to react. But you know, if someone uses this term for themselves, then we want to mirror language. We want to mirror language. I told you before, my name is Logan. I use he, him, his pronouns. I identify as queer, and I would love for folks to mirror that language. You can talk about me later on. Oh yeah, Logan, he gave his presentation. He told us he's queer. Cool. But does anyone have any questions before we move on? Awesome. And I just want to say too, some sexual orientations: straight, yay, bisexual, pansexual, ace, so many more. But just in case we weren't sure. So transphobia and cissexism, just for the sake of time, I'm going to go a little faster. But when we think of these words, transphobia, that is going to be the oppression, discrimination against trans people, cissexism, you know, having that belief that this is the normal, this is better than transgender folks. So physical violence, 1 in 10 trans people reported being attacked within the past year due to their gender identity. We talked about those microaggressions before when we misgender or dead name someone purposefully. I also want to say that it is considered a microaggression when we start to completely ignore the people in our lives and not use the pronouns or the name that they told us that is affirming. You know, it is considered a microaggression too if you meet someone and they tell you that their name or that their pronouns are they, them, theirs, and then we go, okay, I'm just going to use your name. That is considered a microaggression because they told us their pronouns. They told us how they'd like to be addressed, what their pronouns are, not like, it is mandatory. And then systematic discrimination. 1 in 6 trans people have lost a job due to their gender identity. 1 quarter reported experiencing housing discrimination because of their gender identity. There are still places in the US, and I want to say that Illinois does have some protections and laws, you know, that help trans folks out to become less discriminated against. But I want to say, you know, when we think about gender identity and gender expression, how there are folks that, you know, I see myself, this is who I am, but I'm not expressing myself in this way. If I can't get a job because someone keeps discriminating against me because of my gender identity, how easy is it going to be to find housing, right? Just things to think about. And then the intersectionality of race and gender. This is super important. This should be a workshop on its own. 100%. This is intersectionality. This is a term that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, activist, scholar, Black woman, just really, really wonderful person. Please look her up. So intersectionality, people are disadvantaged by multiple sources of oppression when they carry multiple marginalized identities. Transgender people of color face greatly elevated negative outcomes in every area of life. Black and Indigenous transgender individuals reported some of the worst outcomes regarding discrimination in obtaining a job, violence in the street, and by law enforcement, accessing healthcare and homelessness. This slide in particular makes me think of just, this past year, there was a trans woman, I believe just this past year, maybe it was a year prior, a trans woman in Texas who was in the ER and was facing so much discrimination being a Black trans woman, with medical professionals saying, I don't know how to take care of this person, that she actually died in the ER. And so this is very real. This is something that is happening today. And we really want to bring this up because this is something that can't be ignored. And also when we're thinking about our students and we're thinking about our staff members, we need to think about these intersectionalities of life too. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and pass the baton.
Sí, ya voy. Okay, so yeah, now we're going to talk a little about the impact of gender and tie it into our school communities. So, Logan, can you do the slide? Yeah, you have to advance the slides. Okay, here we have this photo. Would anybody like to share with me, just upon looking at this small child, what they see, maybe, some gendered stereotypes or assumptions that we might make in this day and age based on the photo of this child? You could also put in the chat, but just quickly, what's coming to mind?
Their hair.
Oh yes, the hair, long hair. Anyone else?
Their dress.
Okay, yes, Logan is putting in the work for y'all. Yeah, so this is a photo of, I forgot his full name, FDR, the former president. He was born in 1882. So this photo, he's like about 2 years old. But this dress, these shoes, this hat, this hair is something he does look sad. I think in 1884, it was probably a sad time to be a 2-year-old. But yeah, so that was like 100+ years ago. And this is how they were dressing babies in these bleached dresses for convenience, purely for changing diapers. The hair, a gender neutral hairstyle. But again, this was over 100 years ago. And then in today, we might interpret or assume the gender of this child based on how dresses and haircuts and shoes have just been like socially constructed for us now. But 100 years ago really wasn't that long ago, like in the context of things. We have this quote, I'll read it. The generally accepted rule is pink is for boys and blue for the girls. The reason is that pink, being a more decided and stronger color, is more suitable for the boy, while blue, which is more delicate and dainty, is prettier for the girl. So this quote is from 1918, which again, 100+ years ago. But now we see when folks have those gender reveal parties, they're using pink for girls and blue for boys. So in 100 years, we've totally switched it around, and it's certainly gone through that multiple times. So how we're thinking of gender and these like assumptions and stereotypes is always in flux, and it's always changing. And the norm is kind of how we're all contributing to that together. So I would rather go to the next slide so we can start to relate this a little more to our school communities, because as Logan mentioned earlier, we all have a gender identity, and so gender impacts all of us, but especially in school buildings, bullying that's happening, about 50% of it in elementary school buildings is happening based on gender and or sexual orientation. And more than 50% of students are reporting feeling unsafe in schools and relating that to being neither masculine enough or feminine enough. So this is impacting all students, students that might not be facing this bullying or this discrimination. It's still contributing to the school environment that they're learning in. And so it's really important that these are safe spaces for all students to be able to learn and relate to their peers, and also being able to talk to their teachers. So I know too, I saw Lauren had mentioned too about supporting students. So we can dive into that right now by supporting trans and gender expansive students. In a school, I actually don't know the source of this. Was it a school district or a school? But the school
across the US.
Oh, across the US. Okay, our whole nation of school mental health professionals that were surveyed, 71% felt that the school teachers were very or somewhat supportive of LGBTQ students. When the actual students were asked, only 26% of them reported that they actually felt safe in the classroom. And then 62% felt that there was LGBTQ related discrimination based in the policies or practices in the school. And then 70%, that is a huge number, heard negative remarks about sexual orientation or gender expression from the teachers or school staff. This is pretty alarming because, again, when students are feeling respected and affirmed in the school building, they're able to show up to class, participate, and be engaged with what they're in school for. So when LGBTQ related harassment did occur in a school building, 55% of students did not report the incident. And we can probably look to this 60%. The reason of that happening is because 60% felt that, or actually when they did report it to a school staff or teacher, that person did nothing about the incident, or they told a student to ignore the incident. So if you're a young person and something really terrible and traumatic has happened to you, and then you go to an adult that you trust, that you think is going to be there to support you and stand up for you, and their response is to tell you to ignore the situation, or they just don't escalate it to the next person, that's really damaging to a young person and their sense of self and how they're going to be able to show up to school every day, affecting their mental health and their ability to perform in school and kind of move on through the school environment. So of students in schools, LGBTQ students in schools, there's certainly higher levels of victimization and experiencing that bullying and harassment. And that kind of results in those students being more likely to miss school, having lower grade point averages, having or not making any plans post-secondary education. So after high school, not solidifying any plans for what they want to do next. But then it's also impacting their self-esteem, their experiences with depression, and then that sense of school belonging, which is super important for young people to feel like they have a community and to feel supported in that community as well.
I would just like to add, because I like to do this with this slide, but it's not that LGBTQ students aren't as smart as our straight students. It's that, when you are someone who is not being recognized, as he just mentioned, and let's say I'm in history class and I raise my hand and this person continues to dead name me or misgender me, am I going to raise my hand again? Am I going to want to be in class? Am I going to want to be in school? And so this, these little things really impact how our youth are able to learn.
Yes, and so for young people, having just one supportive adult in their lives makes a drastic difference in that sense of self-esteem, sense of belonging. And can you make it do the statistic? Yes. So having one supportive adult cuts the chance that an LGBTQ youth will attempt suicide by 40%. And that is a huge difference, having just one adult. So if all of us here are a part of a community, a school community, by being supportive adults and demonstrating that, we are people that can be trusted and that we will affirm young people's identities, that's going to make a huge difference in their lives and in their ability to be present in school and to show up as themselves and to feel good about themselves. These are just some examples of some organizations that exist in this world that have made affirming transgender policy statements. If you are a parent or caregiver and your students attend a CPS school, you could look on your school website and see if your school does have a policy statement. Maybe they do, and maybe it's not on the website. And so that's something that you can, an action you can take as an advocate for your young people is to encourage your school to make a policy and then to make that policy very clear by placing it on their website. So supporting students when they're coming out, I know this is where Lauren had also had a question. So if this is your young person, or if you're an adult and a young person or a student comes out to you, that's really amazing because that young person has identified you as somebody that they can trust and that they have identified you as someone they feel like will respect and validate them if they do come out to you. So certainly important to hear what they're saying, but wanted to also understand if they've shared this with anybody else, if you're the first person that they've come out to, and do they want anyone else to know? Are they coming to you because it's the first time and they just want to tell one person? Or are they hoping that you're going to be somebody that can go out and let other folks know? If you're a teacher, if that's letting the counselor know, or the teacher of the next class period. And same going to if you're an adult in this young person's life, maybe if they want you to tell siblings or neighbors, but they're just identifying you as that person to be their advocate in this situation. And some more notes on if a student comes out to you or your young person, not specifically student, but what they're sharing with you is serious. They're telling you about themselves. That's super vulnerable and brave to let you know how they feel, who they are. And so it's not something to be played down. It's something to be respected and affirmed. And then if they're letting you know too that in coming out that they want you to refer to them as a new name or different pronouns, super important to respect those. And as we covered earlier, sometimes mistakes do happen, but it's important that we're trying all the time. And eventually we'll get to the point where that's their name, those are their pronouns, and there are no other options, and we'll get it right. But definitely recognizing that, when we are validating their name and their pronouns, that's helping contribute to their sense of self and them feeling safe in this space, whether it's your classroom or your home. We want them to be happy and healthy, and this is a way that we can contribute to that. Again, when you're asking them, does anybody else know? Should I tell anybody else? With that, making sure that you're not disclosing this young person's sexual orientation or gender identity to anybody else without their consent. If they told you and they said it's only you, you're not telling the neighbors or their siblings without their consent, unless that young person has said, could you please do this? In the school building, this also, so I know the question that Lauren had was about parents. And so if a student comes out to you and they don't want parents to know, then this space, your classroom, or if you're just a teacher in the building and they have a relationship with you, maintaining that and not telling the parents is super important. I feel like Booker, maybe if there's a link of is it online on the CPS website about Aspen and name changes, and just there's some, yes, in the CPS building, if a student does want to come out to you and tell you, please refer to me as this name, please use these pronouns, you can do that in the classroom. Certainly in Aspen, if it does get changed there, the parents will see that. So talking about that with the student and making sure that they know what their options are for being affirmed in the school building, and then you also working together with them to make sure that they're supported. Counselors as well are allowed up to 8 90-minute sessions with students ages 12 and up without notifying a student's guardian. Super important resource. I guess we don't really need the classroom one. Did I say I would take the slide? Yes. Okay. So institutional inclusion. This can happen in our school building. So again, as parents or caregivers here, these are things that, thank you, Booker, for dropping that in the chat. So for school staff, for more info about how to support students who might want to change their name or using pronouns, that slide deck will help you navigate CPS in that regard. But in our school community, parents and caregivers, we can advocate for our schools to be more inclusive places. So that means avoiding gender segregation, whether that's PE classes or sex ed classes, or any other instances in schools where they might be, for some reason, changing the school or the classroom setup based on gender. We can advocate and ask our principals to not do that. Same with restroom and locker access. Students should be allowed to use the restrooms and locker rooms that affirm their identity. And that's that. If there's a dress code in our schools, I know that's super common in CPS for schools, some schools to have dress codes or uniforms that students are allowed to choose which uniforms they're going to wear. And again, that's that. And we support that. In after school activities or sports or anything like that, again, students are allowed to play on the team that they want to play on that affirms their gender identity. Yes, and when we're talking to other students, another resource in the chat about CPS guidelines for supporting transgender and gender nonconforming students. This is an excellent toolkit. It is on the website, certainly worth a read. And when we're talking to students, our young people's friends, anyone else, it's really important to avoid assumptions about family structures, because there is a million and one ways to have a family, to be a part of a family and a community. And when we're leaving it open, it just, again, affirms that all of our existence and our community structures are valid, and that we're doing it right and we're doing the best we can. And then if your school has a GSA, that would be a Gender and Sexuality Alliance. It's a really excellent resource for students. And so supporting that in whatever way you can as an adult in the school community bolsters the ability for that club as well to be available to students and to be serving them to the best. Here's a photo that demonstrates that we can have school traditions while also, not being gendered in how we celebrate things like homecoming, because in this photo from Northwestern University, they have a homecoming, and generally, traditionally, homecomings have had like a homecoming king and a homecoming queen, but we can also have these traditions and avoid gendered titles as such, because at Northwestern, I think they are the Wildcats, and they just have a homecoming Wildcat cats. They have multiple homecoming Wildcats. And so that is a way in which traditions can be celebrated and recognized, so we can also adapt to be more inclusive in those practices as well. So again, in institutional inclusion, so what this might look like in our school communities, respecting the privacy and confidentiality, again, not sharing people's business that they don't want us to, and always asking for consent and checking in with students as well about what they want to be shared, what information they want to be shared, and in what ways. In the policies that our schools have, making sure that there is explicit information about non-discriminatory policies and anti-bullying and diversity. And again, as parents and caregivers, we can really hold our principals and school admin accountable to that. If that's showing up to the parent meetings and making sure that our voices are heard and that it's included in the agendas, and principals know that as parents and adults in the school community, this is important to us because it's important to our students. And the forms that go out at the beginning of the year, we always get all those forms, but then also throughout the year as well, there are forms for students, and making sure those are inclusive of all identities. I know schools kind of handle their own forms a little differently per school, but again, that's where you come in. When you see the form and you recognize that it's not inclusive, that's a great time to reach out to your school admin and again, advocate for that change. And then ensuring that the resources and support are easy for students and guardians to locate. Booker dropped those links in the chat. So one of them does link to the public website that has some information and resources for parents. And same if your student is feeling like there are no resources for them in the school, again, reaching out to the admin I could drop OSHW's email, but there are folks, especially in the Office of Student Health and Wellness, who will support you and your student in making sure your school is affirming your student. Thank you, Booker. Okay, the email is in the chat if you need support, you know, and making sure that your school is affirming your students, even if it's not your student, in the school community, making sure it's a more inclusive place. There are ways and supports from central office. Regular staff trainings, yeah. Okay, gender support. Oh, yes, I'm speaking so fast. Thank you, Myra, for that call in. Okay, so gender support plans. Again, as I mentioned in CPS, there's kind of multiple ways that our students are, you know, they come out to us as a teacher or an adult and they say, in the classroom, this is the name that I want to be called. We can do that in the classroom in this social setting. But again, because we're in a school and there are forms and our names are in Aspen, et cetera, you can work with the school admin, a student can work with school admin to create a gender support plan that affirms them, and also kind of navigating these many, yeah, like, what is the word I'm looking for? I don't know what you call Aspen. The word, just navigating the whole, yes, the system, a system, that is truly the word I was looking for with system, but navigating the school system, but then also socially as well, how a student will feel affirmed by their peers and by the school staff. Remote learning, I know we are kind of bouncing all over the place with remote learning. If your student is in remote learning, there are some considerations that can be made to make that classroom setting more inclusive. So thinking about and working with your school admin for how display names could be in Google Meets, they actually can't be changed, but still working with school admin to make sure that teachers are asking students what their affirmed names are and how they can be ensured that their student will be referred to by their affirmed name. And same with pronouns, encouraging our school staff and teachers to make that a practice of sharing their pronouns, of providing the space for students to share their own pronouns, and mirroring the language that our students are using when they're talking about themselves. And then certainly the cameras. Oh, okay, boom, boom, boom. Logan is pushing it along. I'll just myself.
Yeah, no, my apologies. I don't mean to cut you off. Just for the sake of time, because we only have 4 minutes left, I just wanted to give y'all some ideas on how to get started. And thank you, Talia. Once again, I'm sorry I cut you off. But some ways to get started. When we're thinking about the media, we're thinking about books, movies, music. We can think of music artists that use they, them, their pronouns. We could think of Demi Lovato, Sam Smith. Thinking about your own home libraries, thinking about the school libraries, classroom libraries. Are there books that show different types of families, different types of lead characters? Are there books about historians in the LGBTQ community? And it's really important that we recognize their LGBTQ identities, because we want to be able to hold up those mirrors to our students, to our youth. Learning about gay and trans people doesn't make anyone gay or trans, but it creates empathy, it creates understanding. Once again, it creates a view of the world outside of yourself. And so the reason why it is so important to bring up these identity factors is because when I was in high school, we barely talked about the fact that some of these athletes and artists and writers and activists were part of the LGBTQ population. I had no idea. And so therefore, I didn't know I could be these things. I didn't know that it was possible for me to have that acceptance or to see someone that is similar to me in my identity, be able to live in their truth. And then, of course, incorporating non-binary people and non-traditional families into our scenarios in the classroom. The last thing I'll say too is historical events. We should not just be talking about LGBTQ people 1 month out of the year. We should be talking about, historical figures and dates when they come up. We should be integrating this within all of our lesson plan, just like we wouldn't talk about Black history only in February. We shouldn't be only talking about it in February, but that Black history is our history. These are our historians, and the same with the LGBTQ community. And then inclusive health curriculum. This is super important as well. We should not be making assumptions about what type of puberty our students are going to go through, or what they should learn about. We should learn about all bodies and all different types. So that is about it for us. Please know that you're going to get these slides. So anything that we weren't able to make it through within our time together, please know that you can review that. You also have my email as well as Talia's email. And so we are 100% always available for your questions, comments, concerns, or if you're having some trouble contacting our fun CPS folks, we can go ahead and, give them a poke for you. But thank you all so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. So if it is okay, we are going to close out the session. If it's okay with the Larry's team, I don't know if they feel comfortable staying behind if anybody has any questions. Okay, great. So we will do that. And for the sake of the recording and for the sake of everybody's time, if there's anybody left behind that would like to ask questions, please feel free to stay behind. But at this moment, we're going to close out the session. Again, please don't forget to sign up for our newsletter and don't forget to fill out our survey. If you have any thoughts about the session, please let us know, or if you want to see more of this, please let us know as well. And thank you so much to Larry's and the Office of Student Health and Wellness for being here with us and learning us how to navigate this world. And I just want to leave one last tidbit with any parents who are on the line and who may be watching this recording now, that I recently am I'm a mother of someone who came out to me as transgender. So my son, and so I still have, I'm still catching myself with a lot of different pronouns and things like that. So forgive yourself if you don't, get it right at the first time, or if you catch yourself doing certain things. You're human, and as long as you're trying, I think that people will see it. So, and with that, I hope everybody has a great day, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Have a good night, everybody. And if you have any questions, please feel free to say bye.
Kelly, can you stop the recording?